Hey guys, Mr. P. In this video, we're going to talk about the pH scale and what it means to be acidic and what it means to be basic, what an acid is and what a base is, and talk a little bit about buffers in order to understand what acids and bases can do to a solution, and talk about the significance of these buffers in helping organisms maintain homeostasis. So the first thing we need to do is talk about why water is said to be neutral. So water, as we talked about in the last video, is H2O. So you have one atom of oxygen and two atoms of hydrogen on every molecule of water. And so you can see that there is a water molecule on the left and a water molecule on the right. We also know, based on our last video, that water molecules are really good about creating hydrogen bonds. Based on the polarity, we know that, as a quick review, the water molecules have a slightly negative side and a slightly positive side. The hydrogen side of the water molecule is slightly positive because they have a proton in their neutron, which is the most outside charge on this side of the water molecule, and we know the oxygen has a lot of the valence electrons and a lot of the electronegativity, and so the oxygen side is the slightly negative side of the water molecule. And because the water molecule is said to be polar, it can form a bond, a hydrogen bond, between the slightly negative oxygen side and the slightly positive hydrogen side. But when we talk about water in terms of a pH and why water is said to be neutral, it's because water molecules split to form ions, and it's not necessarily important that you know that one water molecule in 550 million water molecules splits, but you need to know that some water molecules in a solution will split to form ions, and we know, based on our previous videos, that ions are a negatively or positively charged molecule based on whether they lost or gained electrons. So in this particular image, we have hydronium ions, which is an H3O positive ion, and we have a hydroxide ion, which is an OH negative ion. So the fact that this water molecule lost one of its hydrogen and thus lost the proton that the hydrogen carries with it means that it is left with a negative charge. This would be the anion because it's negatively charged, and this one received the proton and the extra hydrogen, and so this one would become the cation. It's a positively charged ion. The hydroxide is a negatively charged ion. Since the number of positive ions is equal to the number of negative ions, water is said to be electrically neutral. So because there is an equal split, meaning all of these water molecules are going to form an even number of these hydronium ions and hydroxide ions, and there is an equal, therefore, amount of negative ions to positive ions, the anion to cation ratio is equivalent. It is said to be electrically neutral and therefore would have a pH of 7. What does that mean in terms of the pH scale? We know that the neutral point of our pH scale is right in the middle of 0 to 14, which would be 7. The neutral point would have a equal concentration of H plus ions to OH negative ions. Remember in that last slide I just said the OH negative ion is the hydroxide ion, and that's going to be one of the critical ions in terms of alkalinity for a particular solution, but another equally important ion is the H plus ion, which can either be that hydronium ion or just a hydrogen, a proton, a standalone hydrogen. As we move towards our acidic side of the pH scale, the number of H plus ions in the solution is going to increase tenfold each level. So as we go from a pH of 7 to 6, one jump, we're going to increase our H plus ion by a factor of 10. We're then going to increase by a factor of 10, increase by a factor of 10, increase, and so on. At the exact same time we are increasing our concentration of H plus ions, we are equally decreasing our concentration of the OH negative ions. So as we go again from 7 to 6, our OH negative ion concentration is dropping by a factor of 10. So our H plus ion will increase by a factor of 10, our OH negative ion will decrease by a factor of 10. And so as we continue to drop in our pH, meaning we continually increase our acidity, we are increasing our H plus ions while decreasing our OH negative ions. Now on the other side, if we start at 7, which is our neutral, H plus and OH negative equal, and we go up 1 pH from 7 to 8, we are going to increase our OH negative ion concentration by a factor of 10, and therefore decrease our H plus ion concentration by a factor of 10 as well. So every time we increase by a pH of 1, meaning from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, we are continually increasing our OH negative and continually decreasing our H plus ion. It is important to note that every step on the pH scale represents a factor of 10, either increase or decrease. So as we move up our pH from 7 towards 14, we are greatly increasing our OH negative and greatly decreasing our H plus ion. And as we move down the pH, meaning we're getting more acidic, going from 7 towards 0, we're going to greatly increase our H plus ion while decreasing our OH negative ions. So what is an acid? An acid is any compound that releases H plus ions into solution. Remember, H plus ions are the ions that are going to be increasing as our pH drops. So an acid, by definition, is going to release H plus ions from the compound, causing our H plus ion concentration to increase, therefore dropping our pH and making our solution more acidic. So an example of an acid would be HCl, hydrochloric acid. HCl is a single hydrogen and a single chlorine. Chlorine and hydrogen bonded together make an HCl, and when you put HCl into a solution, they're going to break apart into individual H plus ions and the negative chlorine ion, which would again be the anion. And because these chlorine ions are releasing their H plus ion, the water molecules, which is the solvent in this particular solution, will pick up those H plus ions, create these H3O positive ions, or H3O positive molecules. They therefore are going to, because we are increasing the H plus ion concentration, dropping our pH, meaning it is by definition an acid. In contrast, a base is any compound that produces those hydroxide ions in solution. And so when we look at this particular compound, NaOH, sodium hydroxide, we have an Na, which is a sodium atom, we have an oxygen, and we have a hydrogen. When the sodium hydroxide is put into our solution, which contains water as the solvent, the sodium ion is going to pop off, and you'll notice that the sodium maintains the positive charge, so that would be our cation. The OH stays together, and so the OH becomes the negative ion because the sodium takes with it the protons that have a positive charge. They leave the OH negative, which becomes the hydroxide ions, and because this particular compound is releasing the OH negative in solution, our OH negative ion concentration is increasing. That is leading to a pH that is also increasing, which leads to a more basic or more alkaline solution, meaning our pH goes up. We go from 7 to 9 or 9 to 11. That is the difference between bases and acids. It's simply what type of ion, whether H plus ion or OH negative ion, they are releasing in a particular solution. And so we need to talk about what organisms have in their cells and in their solutions in order to withstand the changes and therefore maintain homeostasis. So when we talk about buffers, buffers are weak acids or bases that can react with strong acids or bases to prevent sharp, sudden changes in pH. This is very important when we talk about maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis, by definition, remember, is the ability to maintain a constant internal condition. Cells and organisms need to withstand the changes of these ions because the ions are being released all the time through metabolic processes. When we look at this particular image, you will see that there are hydroxide ions. These are the hydroxide ions. You remember the hydroxide ions, when added to a solution, are going to cause a pH to rise. However, because solutions can have these buffer solutions in them, they can withstand the changes or the effects of these hydroxide ions being added. You'll notice that when these hydroxide ions are added, the OH negative are going to simply pull some of these hydrogens off, meaning an H plus is going to be pulled off of these two H2PO4 molecules, and they're going to combine with the OH negatives that were just added, and they're going to therefore create water. Water has a neutral pH, or a pH of 7, and therefore will not change the overall pH of the solution, and it will maintain stability even when a base is added, such as hydroxide, or it could be sodium hydroxide. But because a solution is increasing our OH negative concentration, it should be increasing our pH, but it is not, because the buffer that's in place is causing neutrality as those hydroxide ions are added, and therefore withstanding the change in pH. And because there's a lot of these hydrogen ions in place, they can withstand a lot of this hydroxide, but they can't withstand it forever. Buffers are critical in allowing organisms to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis, like I said, is the maintenance of a constant internal condition. It would be really, really bad for our blood, for instance, which is a solvent or a solution in our body that needs to withstand large changes in pH, because we want to maintain stability in our blood pH. That's it for this particular video. If you learned something, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. See ya.